What's going on, Jackson? You right, bro?
We're live streaming out of Moscow. You know what it is. It's good to be here.
Hi, Jackson.
Yeah, what's going on, man? Yeah, we're just talking about the genocide going on in Gaza. How's Moscow anyway, bro?
Moscow's great, just like China. You know, everyone I talk to here, even like Jewish people, they're all appalled by what's happening in Gaza. And America really seems in the UK. It's like the only places that it's like there's somewhat of a debate. There's for some reason a debate about a genocide. It's crazy. And you know, almost 6 months in. That's crazy. It's insane. It's been that long, but you know, it's good to be in a rational, civilized place. Moscow is beautiful, and I do think Moscow is the best city on the earth. It's If you've never been, you have to come. And it sounds like I'm gassing it up when I talk about it just because I'm pro Russia, but it actually is the best city on the face of the earth. And I think as Americans, Westerners, Savior, I know you're in the UK. It's like we have a lot to learn from this city.
Yeah, 100%. I'm definitely trying to go to Moscow when I get a chance. I want to go towards the end of the year. It looks great over like Christmas time and shit. So definitely on my.
Yo, Jackson, if I could ask you a question, right? I know you're in a different position because obviously you're Jackson Hinkle, right? But is it safe for Americans to go to Russia, or are they like looked at a certain type of way because of our support for Ukraine?
No, I mean, it's very safe to go here, and in the same way, there's obviously risks, but the main concern is coming back home. My colleague Haz Al-Din, who just came back to the United States, he was here with me. And, he was here. He met with some very high network people, but he wasn't at the dinner with Lavrov with me or anything like that. And still, when he went home, they took both of his cell phones. They went through all of his stuff. They went through all his private photos and texts and whatnot. And it's like when we come to Moscow, we're not detained. They treat us very well here. But you go back home. Last time I was detained when I went back home. This time I'm a bit more worried. So I've contacted attorneys. But it's when you're here, everyone's curious and interested and excited to have Americans here. And I'd imagine, this is a similar phenomena to if we were to travel to, say, Beirut or Syria or Tehran right now. It would probably be a similar thing because they know that it's the government that hates them and not the people.
Yeah,
Facts.
man. So go on.
Go ahead, Teddy.
No. I was just saying facts. It's true what he said. But anyways, thank you for joining us, Jackson.
Yeah, and when are you coming back from Russia?
I think I'll be back probably like what day is it? Sunday? It's Saturday or Sunday right now. I think I'm coming back this week at some point, but trying to it's just that's the thing. It's like there's a bunch of people that want to meet and talk about what's going on in the world. They want to hear from an American about what's actually happening in our country, but there's only so many red flags you can raise on a certain trip. And I'd initially scheduled to visit Mariupol on this trip, which I was very excited about, but there were some developments that not Russians, there was lots. As you guys probably know, I'm on the Ukraine kill list, Mirotvorets, and there was some worrying signs coming from people, even on Twitter, posting assassination threats, posting very scary things. So it's like between that and the concerns at the border, it's like it unfortunately didn't materialize. But hopefully, next time I'm here, it's that's something I can do.
I was
Jackson, had you seen the
I wish you
Can't
luck
hear
on your return to the United States, Jackson.
you. What'd you say, Barracks? You cut out there, bro.
no, speaking Jackson was speaking of being on the Mirotvorets, the Ukrainian kill list. I was just wondering if he had seen Tucker Carlson talk about like the Ukrainian assassination attempt on his life. They had there was a plans to put a car bomb on Tucker Carlson's car, like if he had seen that.
Yeah, I did see that. I mean, I think with that scenario, it's like the Russian intelligence services are second to none. I'm sure they were monitoring it and they kind of let that develop so they could definitively prove that's what they were doing, before obviously stop it before anything really substantial developed. But I think they wanted to show the world that, like, yeah, this is actually what they're trying to do. They're trying to kill Tucker Carlson, but they're way ahead of it. But it served interest, I guess, to show the world what was happening. And I've met with some people here who are involved, I guess, in the Russian response to all these sorts of terror attacks. Because last time I came to Russia, it was when it was like it was let's see, it was in like September and early October, right before the October 7th occurred. And when I first came, it just the drone strikes on Moscow City, like the downtown area, had taken place, and those were, I remember seeing the bit like large scale buildings, like the windows blown out. I met some people who were actually working in the building, and they essentially had like work off for the week because their windows got blown out with the drone attacks. But at the time, I was frustrated and concerned because I'm like, how are you? Obviously, it's a massive country, but how are you letting something like this go on regularly in Moscow? But since then, the Russian security services seem to have really, really leveled up their game, and there's been no substantial threats or actions taken against any of the major cities from what I've seen. Maybe a little bit here and there, but nothing like we saw in September and prior to that.
It's crazy to me how, obviously Jackson is an American, Tucker is an American, and Ukraine is getting all of their support from America, right? Or else they would have probably never survived a week against Russia. And they're able to openly put American citizens on a hit list while they're supposed to be an American ally. I mean, that's supposed to go against all of America's principles, like we're supposed to protect our citizens abroad first before anybody. So it's crazy that you even one have to deal with that, and two that that's even a thing, right? Because the hypocrisy of the West, I think, got so exposed with Russia and Ukraine, and now more so with Israel and Gaza, that they just completely lost their position on this like moral stage in the world, right? Because even if you look at India, right? Like right when you joined us, we were having this conversation with this kid about India, and it's like you see all these videos that are circulating around Twitter that expose like atrocious human rights issues against women, but the West doesn't say anything about it, and it's the excuse for them to talk like constantly, let's say, target countries in the Middle East where like they feel like they want to go liberate the women, and it's all bullshit, right? Like it's all bullshit.
Yeah, the situation with India is so it's so I guess like embarrassing for the West because for the West, they dictate everything with countries they don't like nowadays by highlighting perceived grievances over LGBT issues or woke issues, cultural issues, feminist issues. They say that we have to coup the Iranian government because of an alleged attack on I forget her name, Mashi, some young girl that suffered a cardiac arrest, and they said that the IRGC killed her or something. But it's like literally everything that U.S. policy does now is dictated by the perceived notions of a refusal to guarantee these woke rights to certain countries. But then when you look at India, of course, we are very close with India, and have no uh, interest in abandoning our ties with India. And I think the West would like to use India as a wedge against China, and probably, have done a substantial number in Indian Chinese ties by focusing on those border issues and trying to exacerbate those issues. But India is it's just like it's disgusting what's happening there. And obviously, I've talked to a lot of Indians, and you have like the Punjab region or whatever it's called, where you have the Muslim majority region, and those guys are all normal. Like they love Imran Khan. They're just like very normal people. But then you see the stuff where they're like beating women, they're raping women, they're having like cow shit fights in the streets. It's like that they literally are a more barbaric uh, society than the Taliban, than Afghanistan. It's like, why are we seizing $200 billion in Afghan gold reserves and foreign assets when they literally treat women better than Indians?
No, 100% agree with you, bro. Go on, Barrett. You got something to say?
Sir, I've sent you 3 posts about Pakistan. Can you please repost them? And
I'm sorry, your name isn't Barracks. Barracks, go ahead.
Barracks, unmute your mic.
Double mute, bud.
I'm being censored with by the double mute button. I don't appreciate this, but I did have a question for another question for Jackson about the because you mentioned Iran. So I had been in some spaces with Samira Khan, who pointed out this alarming trend in the pro-Palestinian camp on X, on Twitter, but also elsewhere. This alarming trend in the pro-Palestinian camp to demonize and attack Iran, and to call Iran the primary enemy, that Iran is worse than Israel. And this is coming from our own side, the pro-Palestinian camp. I just wanted to know if you had noticed this trend, and where do you think this trend is coming from our own side?
I think it's coming from the Gulf states, and I think it's coming from nefarious Sunni influence. And I think it's very troubling because it's the same people who say, "Oh, Bashar al-Assad killed his own people. He gassed his." It's like literally this week, the OPCW came out with another report proving that ISIS was behind the I think it was in like Maria, Syria, or whatever the name of the city was. ISIS was behind that chemical attack there. So not Syria, not Assad, as they all claim. So it's people. The reason why they hate Iran and the reason why they hate Syria even more is because Iran has very good business ties with Russia, but they also have a lot of problems with Russia. But they understand business is business, and the Russians understand that as well. And they have a lot to gain from doing business. But Syria, going back to Hafez al-Assad, has a very close relation with Russia and also with Iran. So all these Gulf states, which is where a lot of the money is coming from in the pro-Palestine movement for these major protests you see in cities in the U.S. and the U.K. Al Jazeera, of course, is Gulf state media, Qatari media. These are people who are very worried about a deepening Shia influence in the region, and that's why they're completely okay with backing ISIS and Al Qaeda and all these, Al Qaeda linked groups like Al Nusra against Syria and against, Iranian backed forces. So I think average people who say bad things about Iran and Syria, it's not like they have any true understanding of the influence, the power, and the true infrastructure that Iran provides for the resistance, um, or misunderstanding of that. It comes from people simply just falling for whatever, like Al Jazeera says about Iran and Syria, or whatever these governments say, or the people who are being paid by them have to say, like a lot of these movement leaders. So it's very troubling.
Javiria, you had a question?
Yeah. Good morning. This is Javeria from Pakistan. I appreciate all of you, whatever you are doing, for Palestine, for the people of Gaza. We really appreciate it, especially Jackson. Jackson, how you feel, with this new administration? Because we are expecting that Trump will defeat Biden. So do you think, the shift in the policy will come? Because what I could see, even in Pakistan, we are not allowed to raise or to speak openly against Israel. So do you think any change we are expecting with the Trump administration, or that will go worse?
I wish Trump would be a hero that we all long for with regard to this issue, because if he did, he would have so much support from the youth, like an incredible amount of support from the youth. And I do think it's interesting because I know a lot of very high level people within the Trump movement. And obviously, some of them hate my guts and some of them hate all of us, and they're very pro Israel. But oddly enough, there are there are a bunch of people that are silently anti-Israel, condemn the genocide, and some who are even further down. They're even further. They're like pro-Palestine. So it's very interesting to see Trump continue on this path of supporting Israel, being Zion Don, and I don't really understand it because from what I understand, he has, the financial donor interests that are backing Israel have lost connection with Trump to a certain extent, and I know that was the case in his last campaign. Sheldon Adelson, I believe, was not friendly with him anymore. And I also understand that Ivanka Trump's husband, Jared Kushner, who was one of the main forces behind all the terrible policies that the Trump administration pursued with Iran and Syria and with Israel, he's no longer going to be in the White House. I don't know what the level of his involvement will be with day-to-day policy, but he's not going to be in the White House. But I'm not really hopeful that it's going to be any major change. I do think Trump wants to have peace, and I do know he hates Netanyahu for personal reasons. So anything could happen, and that's, I think, why one of the reasons the deep state is worried about Trump, because he is a bit of, he doesn't stray too far from the establishment, and he surrounded himself with a lot of terrible people, but he is still a wild card. Like the fact that we have to even have these conversations and ask questions like, what will be his Israel policy? What will be his Russia policy? It's like that alone is, enough of a threat to the deep state that they feel like they have to take him out.
Cream cheese,
I'd
go
say yeah.
ahead.
One of the only, I'd
Oh,
say one of the good things about Trump though is just his ties with Russia and shit, innit? Like Russia and China. That he's got good ties with Putin, but I'm just not too sure about what he's gonna do with the Israel Gaza stuff.
That's actually an interesting point though, Savior, right? Because I was thinking about this yesterday, and yet there's been like a lot of clips with Trump fully supportive of Israel lately, but we forget that he does have really good relations with Putin. He does have really good relations with Xi, and those other world leaders are completely against the genocide in Gaza. So nobody, like, we really don't know what's going to happen when he actually becomes president and sits down with other world leaders. Like, who gives a shit about Netanyahu when you're sitting with Putin and Xi? I mean, Netanyahu could try to wedge himself in as a world leader as much as he wants, but it's all because of the Zionist influence in America, right? Like if you if you ruin that relationship just a little bit, Israel like really becomes insignificant, you know?
sorry, Savior.
No,
I didn't know
100%.
you were back, so I was
No,
trying
it's
to.
cool. Go on, go ahead.
Yeah, cream cheese. Go ahead.
Good meowing, everybody. First of all, Jackson, thank you for coming up. This is kind of surreal. I've followed you for like a little bit now, and I may not agree with everything you say and do, but I do appreciate as an American how you kind of just straddle many different lines and support the Palestinian conflict. But something I wanted to ask after you said, the youth in America, would support Trump and everything. Far be it for me to say this, but like, do you think it also just might have to do with people being a little uneducated in geopolitics and just also in the advocacy of civic duties? Because no offense to Trump or anything like that, or to whatever, but he, like you said, he's a wild card, right? And as a TV personality, he knows how to essentially kind of like play the game, but in a different way that most politicians don't. So, for the youth who kind of are engaging in politics and in their civic duty, do you think it's also kind of I guess maybe a facade in the sense that, like, they're kind of attracted to the possibility that he may be different, but maybe not so much on paper, but just in the personality that he puts himself in, or puts himself forward in. So, like, not only as an American, but also as a young person in this country now, do you think, like, maybe supporting third parties and everything would be obviously not now, but like in a viable future, just with the sole fact that both parties at the moment right now are, they don't work for us, and we know that. And so, also to the point where you said, right, he has a relationship with Xi and Poon, so diplomatically, he has the opportunity to, you know to change things, but at the same time, quote unquote, his handlers being like any Zionist lobby. Do you think that would influence him in a direct way that might essentially collapse these relationships and these diplomatic relationships that he could potentially actually do something with?
I think I understand your question, but I think that I don't think that the youth. I mean, obviously, like a lot of young people support Trump for sure. Most of my friends support Trump, and they don't really, like just average people. Of course, they think like, yeah, that's terrible what's going on in Gaza, but they don't really connect the dots, and they think about what's like what is going on in America. Okay, we have Joe Biden. Democracy's not on the ballot. Dementia's on the ballot. Like we've got a terrible situation, a terrible leader, and they just want to stop the bleeding a little bit, and that's why they want someone like Trump. Again, my friends, not political. They just that's what they see. But as for third parties, every third party in America is captured or incompetent or riddled with debt or a mixture of all three of those things. So there's no real reason to support any third parties. I think that the Libertarian Party is, they have such a fundamental crisis going on right now with their actual ideology, and they have a ideological struggle taking place within it. They need to figure that out and kind of align on common interests, because there's people in the Libertarian Party who I think would happily vote for Nikki Haley. And then there's people within it that are far more rational and reasonable. Um, I think that looking at the situation right now, uh, you know, if Trump were to come out and support or at least condemn Israel, maybe support Gaza. Again, I do think that would cause a lot of people, young people, to support him in the country. I think it would be crazy the level of young people that would come out to support him. But there obviously are far more deeply entrenched interests that are preventing him from doing that. Um, but the last thing I'll say, as for third parties or any party, there's no reason to vote for any party, any candidate, unless they're earning your vote. So, it's not for us to say, okay, this is the least bad person when there's a genocide going on. I think that I think Trump's movement represents a lot of good in America. And that's why I say, I support the MAGA movement, because I think the movement itself is very powerful and it is hopeful. And I think it represents a true American value system of pragmatism. But I think voting for Trump for me right now is out of the question. That's why, people like Haz Al-Din of the Infrared Show, you guys should follow him. He and I are going to be launching a few projects over the next 12 months, one of which will be a political think tank, and one of which will be a party. And well, we need to, the last thing I'll say, but when I came to Russia and when I went to China, obviously we've met with a lot of really important people that we're learning a lot from about how to pick up the pieces of a crumbling empire and how to reorient your country in a way that reflects the true logos of the people and the civilization. But the number one thing I've learned here, I think, that I've taken away is that in Russia in particular, the youth here are not only deeply patriotic, not only deeply keen on these geopolitical issues that we're facing today, but also they are the most educated people I think I've ever met in my life. And I'm talking about like 22, 23-year-old kids. And that's the future of Russia. And same could be said about China. So I think anything we do in America, it needs to not just be focused on saying like, oh, who are we going to vote for? Who's the least worst option? Now, what we need to do, and this is going to be the focus of my work with Haas, again, that we're starting over the next 12 months, is for those who are deeply committed in these conversations and who are deeply engaged, and everyone who's now kind of uh, becoming more interested in these topics as with World War III on the horizon, we need to have a serious, um, like fertile, patriotic, educational movement and dialogue with all these interested parties and youth in the country, and that's what's going to set our country forward on the correct path. Not saying, "Oh, we need to choose the least worst option in the next election."
And so, if I can, maybe sorry, because I literally just woke up and I walked into the room, so that's why my my question may have sounded like more of a statement. But so what do you think of this? Because this is something I've been like thinking about now. Instead of politicians in these political positions and everything, do you believe, or do you, or maybe you can elaborate on this? Do you believe that potentially like we need more activists and advocates in these political positions? Because a lot of the times these people tend to genuinely care about not only the people in their communities but people outside their communities, and for me personally, like nationalism and things like this, they personally don't make sense to me. And as far as like patriotism, like I understand where it comes from, and it's it's understandable to care about where you or take pride in where you come from, but I feel like sometimes we kind of lose those things, or we lose our way in those things, just because it becomes a little more tribalistic. Because personally, like your story is very fascinating as somebody who is an American who considers, and not even you are a patriot in the sense that you are a patriot of this country, and you truly believe in the ideology that you subscribe to. But a lot of people are confused because they see you going to these other places, and they call you a communist, this and that. And personally, I think you're like I personally think like you're a great representation of an American. Again, not really believing in nationalism, but I think you're a great representation because of the fact that you have these other political ideologies that you subscribe to, and that you full heartedly still take pride as an American, but like you do all these other things that may not seem like that. And I think it's because you have the freedom to choose to participate in this political system, but not obviously through like quote unquote the capitalist view, or the quote unquote the the true blue American view, because like a lot of the times people conflate America to completely capitalist, and or at least like hardcore capitalist. And I think you're a great representation of an American who can do a look or choose to follow an ideology but still feel pride in the country that you come from.
Well, I am a communist, so that is true what people say about me. But um, look, I mean, uh, the fundamental problem we have in America right now is that we have a traditional American culture of pragmatism that is at odds with this idealistic, like unipolar, globo homo ruling elite, right? And the vast majority of people do not feel that, especially the vast majority of people who live in the heartland of our country, the Rust Belt, the Midwest, so on and so forth, the South. We have a country that's dominated by the coastline. We have a country dominated by New York and Wall Street and Los Angeles. And what we need to do is learn how we can overcome this conflicting power struggle within the United States and develop that pragmatic, natural American logos in a way that is not antagonistic to the rest of the world. And we used to have that in America. if you look at people such as Henry Carey, who was Abraham Lincoln's economic advisor, I mean, they had very close relations with Russia. They had very close relations with countries all across the world. They did ample trade. They shared, they shared technologies with one another, and the trade when it came to raw resources was immense. So that's the path to actually achieving the vision of uh, gaining a nation again that is rooted in the tradition of American patriotism, um, and doing it in a way that makes America a nation amongst nations in a multipolar world. And there's no reason for us to continue down this path of unipolar imperialism and trying to keep everyone else under the boot of American imperialism, because it's bound to fail, and we're already seeing that. It's just not going to work. So um, I guess we should be friends with other countries. It's really as simple as that. We shouldn't be doing what we're doing. And it's the last thing I'll say. I've said this before, but Russia is always such a point of contention for a lot of liberals in this country. And I think some people are beginning to wake up to it, but it's still really a problem for a lot of people. They think Russia's this great evil. Russia's a great country, and they supported us all throughout our history. 1776, who supported America against the Brits? Russia. War of 1812, who supported America against the Brits? Russia. Civil War, who supported America against the Brits? Russia. Uh, when you look at when Israel bombed the USS Liberty, who was the first country to respond with their navy to our ship that had been attacked? Russia. 9/11, who was the first country to call the United States? George Bush. Russia. You could go on and on and on with this stuff. There's no reason for us to have problems with these countries. Problems only arose when we developed a government that saw itself as above everyone else and saw all these other countries as subhuman. We'd be far more prosperous if we took the path that China has taken today, I think.
Even World War II, right? Like Russia was on the right side of history during
Well,
World
they
War.
they they weren't on the right side of history. They led it. Like that's another one. Of course, it's like I feel like I don't even need to bring that one up because it's so obvious. But I forget that in America, people think that the U.S. won World War II or something, and both my grandfathers participated in World War II, Americans. And while I, of course, am appreciative of every American, patriotic American who participated, we cannot lose sight of the fact that the Soviet Union put up 27 million people who died. And a lot of those people died in warfare, but a lot of them died in the sieges of, Leningrad and the near total siege of Moscow. And we can't lose sight of that. They were the ones that won World War II. And it seems as though, and this is what uh, I think it was Zhukov who said it. He said, "We liberated Europe from Nazism, and for that they'll never forgive us."
Exactly.
100%. Barrett's
What?
gone.
Yeah,
It was the
let
Red
Barracks
Army that
go.
marched up to Hitler's bunker and made him put that pistol to his head. People forget that it was the Red Army that was knocking on Hitler's door.
Yeah, but it's also crazy how America ended up choosing its alliances after, right? Because if you look at what Russia did, Russia helped, they defeated the Germans. Then if you look at like what Ukraine did, especially Western Ukraine, and how they were actually responsible for like maybe, I don't know, tens or hundreds of thousands of deaths of like Jewish people during that same time. And then after, what America decided to do was label Russia as an enemy and a lot like make alliances with Ukraine and Germany. It's almost like it doesn't make sense because it goes to what Jackson just said. It's like they'll never be forgiven for the good that they did, right? So like no good deed goes unpunished. But also, just on your comments about like unipolarity, the only way unipolarity I think worked in the past was through censorship or through the control of information. And then now the fact that everybody has access to everything, it's one, it's hard for America to maintain its position because it's exposed for all the lies, but then two, it gives other nations the opportunity to actually defend their image, right? So if you, let's say, we see what's happening in Gaza and Palestine now, right? But can you say the same thing for what happened in 2006? I mean, the people in Palestine were probably going through the same exact shit that they're going through now, but it's because of all the information that we have on the internet that, people like Jackson, Suleiman, and just average regular people on Twitter are able to actually go and put that fight to the mainstream media, and then everything just changes from there.
Yeah, and the one thing I'll say, I don't know who said it a moment ago, but or maybe it was you, Teddy, who's talking about they'll never forgive the Soviet Union. Really, if you read what Vyacheslav Molotov, who is Stalin's second in command, had to say about what Stalin and Molotov went through, he was basically like foreign minister during World War II. If you read what they had to say about the United States, about the French, about the UK during World War II, I mean, leading up to the signing of the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, and this was one of the main reasons why the Soviets had to sign it, the Soviets tried to pursue non-aggression pacts with the UK and the French, and some other countries, and they all declined. And the reason for that was because uh, they were unsure, the UK in particular, were unsure whether or not they were going to side with the Germans or whether they were going to side with the Soviets. I know it sounds crazy given how history played out that that's the case, but it actually is true. And that was a real concern. And even throughout the final years of the war, when the negotiations were going on, the United States and the United Kingdom were having regular negotiations and diplomatic talks with the Nazis, and they were refusing to allow the Soviets to engage in those talks with them. Stalin was worried that in the final days of Nazi Germany's decline in the war, that the U.S. and the U.K. may in fact decide to side with them and use them as a pawn against the Soviet Union. And then, lastly, even after the war ended, um, the Americans called out Molotov to come and participate in victory celebrations on May 8th, I believe it was, in San Francisco, or give a speech there or something. And he declined. He said, no, we're going to wait to the 9th. And the reason for that was because he said, we're just going to celebrate on the 9th. But the real reason for that was Stalin was worried that, again, the Americans and the British were going to take this opportunity to lure the Soviets into thinking the war was over and then start attacking them. And then, lastly, even more so, 1946, after the bombs had been developed and utilized, the Soviets actually Stalin deployed an elite group of Red Army troops to the far eastern borders of Russia because Stalin had sincere concerns that the United States was going to drop nukes on the Soviet Union. And if that took place, Stalin was going to order those Soviet troops to go across into Alaska and then cut all the way down the west coast of the United States and start war against the United States or respond to war against the United States. So I think every single Russian leader who has been worried about the United States, every Soviet leader who's been worried about the United States, those are the men who had the sharpest brains and had good heads on their shoulders. And everyone who has tried to pursue peace has either been extremely ignorant, naive, or in the worst cases, of course, like at the fall of the Soviet Union, they were nefarious actors.
Barracks, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Spec. And this is an important, I think, context, Jackson. I want to thank you, Jackson, for pointing that out, because the more people study that, the more people will understand how it relates to what is going on right now in the information war and this moral battle between Russia and Ukraine, between and like which side the Americans are backing. Uh, as you pointed out, I want to ask, as you pointed out, as the British and the French and American bankers were using Hitler as sort of this lapdog to attack the Soviets, and now we're seeing this same trend on X, uh, to count, which I believe is to counter signal you, because as you said, you're a communist, you're a Stalinist. And I don't think it's a coincidence that we're seeing an alarming rise of people posting pro-Hitler content, Hitler speeches, glorifying, Hitler. Do you think, as I do, that this trend of this rise of neo-Nazism on American social media is specifically to countersignal you and Haz al-Din specifically, or just a rise in American class consciousness in general?
I think there's multiple factors. I mean, I was the most viral when I was posting every day. I've taken some time to travel in China, Morocco, and Russia, so my posting's been more infrequent. Uh, but when I was posting every day and I was doing my work, which I guess I'm going to be getting back to when I get back to the U.S. Although I have some more travels planned, very exciting things planned related to Palestine and the resistance. Some interviews that um, I think are going to be the probably uh, biggest interviews that we've seen yet regarding this issue since October 7th. I mean, while I was here, most of you probably know there was a lot of resistance factions that were in Moscow and connections were made. But I think when it comes to the rise in these Hitler posting, Nazi posting on X. I mean, every society is always going to have those like weirdos that fantasize about Hitler and whatnot. Uh, do I think that it's a response to me or Haas or communism gaining popularity? I think in part, yeah. I was the most viral person on Twitter for like a whole month and a half, and I'm a communist. I was more viral than Elon Musk, and that is obviously damaging to the deep state. Um, do I think it's also potentially, though, and probably more so, something to paint the Palestinian movement as being a lot? They say, oh, there's all this pro-Palestine content on X, and then, oh my God, there's all these people posting Hitler. This must be, synonymous. These must be the same people. Yeah, I think it has something to do with that too. I think it's like dead internet theory where some of those Hitler posts are being boosted and whatnot. But the fact of the matter is, history can't be rewritten, and we all know the history of World War II. Even despite being backed by Wall Street and British financial interests, Hitler lost the largest war of all time, and he shot himself at the end of it, which is a huge L. And he was on female hormones, and they burned down the Hirschfield Institute because it contained a lot of damaging evidence of senior Nazi party officials who had mental health issues that we would today define as LGBTQ identities. But I think it's like, yeah, I do think it's a weird phenomena, but it's like you're always gonna have people like that, and it's really just not important. I don't really uh, regard it with any serious concern because it has no basis in the American vision for how we're going to fix our country. Communism does, Nazism does not. It's a failed ideology.
Spec, do you mind if I go? Because I have this idea, I have this thought running in my head, and I don't want
If
to.
you, I've been waiting for just a while
I
for
got
you
you. My
to
bad. My
chime
bad.
in. Yeah, it's okay. So Jackson, my question is pretty simple. Like, what do you think of all the airdrops that are happening? Like, we keep seeing like the faulty ones. We see pictures of them actively bombing while the airdrops are happening. The U.S. says they're not doing it. Like, what are your thoughts on all of this?
Um, I, I don't really know. I'm not like an expert in airdrops. I would be, I guess, surprised if something like this airdrops. There. So I'd be surprised if what we're witnessing with these airdrops right now would happen on such a regular basis if we were airdropping aid to, say, entrapped U.S. soldiers in a given, military conflict. it does seem a little bit odd that this is happening, but I don't really know. I think if anything, is it like done out of a nefarious nature? I don't know, but I think if anything, it just shows how inept the U.S. military is, and if it's not the U.S., the French. If it's not the French, we don't really know who these. I would assume it's the U.S. or the French doing this. Maybe someone could fill me in on that, but I think it goes to show how broken our military is and how inept they are that they can't even do an airdrop of like basic humanitarian goods correctly. Yet they think they're going to be able to defeat Russia, China, and the entire, Shia Middle East and the Alawites in a giant world war confrontation. Like, you guys can't even do airdrops correctly. You can't even defeat the Taliban. Like, let's cool our brakes here. Let's settle for peace.
Yeah, I can actually fill in a number of those blanks, Spec, if, about the airdrops.
Go ahead.
Specifically, I'm sure a lot of you remember that hashtag campaign airdrop aid for Gaza and appealing to King Abdullah of Jordan to airdrop the aid. So the main spearhead of these airdrops is Jordan, the country, in collaboration with Egypt and the United States. And so that's the trifecta who's responsible for coordinating these airdrops to the south and to the north of Gaza. And it's, I would argue, as the fact that Abdullah and the Egyptian government have both taken the opportunity to use these airdrops for very gaudy social media campaigns, that it's just for show. If there's no other more nefarious purpose than that, then it would just be for their own social media boost. Because I've done the math, and a C-130 plane that has been used to drop the aid into Gaza carries about as much cargo, at max capacity, carries about as much cargo as a standard UN food truck that was going into Gaza before the war. So these 3 planes that would drop a few crates, best case scenario was dropping about 2-3% of the aid that was going in on a daily basis before the genocide started. So it's purely just to take the heat off of Israel for not dropping the siege war against Gaza, for keeping the gates closed that allow trucks in, to allow real humanitarian aid in, and also to cover for the fact that Israel is getting 10 times as much aid and money and weapons from the United States.
Thank you for clarifying that for me. We've had a new speaker come up, Cream Cheese. I'll let you go after him just because you've gotten 2 questions in, and I'm sure Jackson's short on time. So go ahead, Suppressed, and then we'll go to Cream Cheese.
Yeah, it's just a clarification regarding the airdrop thing. So it is spearheaded by Jordan. However, the countries that are in it, it's not only the countries that you mentioned. It's Jordan, Egypt, Netherlands, France. Recently, the US participated in the airdrops, UAE as well. So these are mostly the countries that are there. That's what I can remember on top of my head. The aid that was dropped is not sufficient, definitely, to feed anyone. However, it's a way of reaching aid to the people, or they reaching the people that are struggling on ground. Definitely, it's not a replacement for the trucks that are there. Is it a PR stunt? Yes, it is a PR stunt done by most of the countries that are participating in it. And there are other initiatives that are being run to pressure the countries to open the borders and allow the trucks in. Because either way, is the main point, or the main point of reaching aid or aid going into Gaza is going to be the trucks, regardless of whatever happens. And it doesn't make sense that the US is wanna build a port in Gaza itself, and having 1,000 soldiers going to that specific quote unquote port. My thoughts is it's a new military base in the Middle East, as they always do. It's not actually a port, but anyways, they are saying it's a port. While a few kilometers away from the port, there is the Rafah crossing. They can simply, if they want to send soldiers there, how about sending the soldiers to secure the trucks of aid that are going in and making sure that they are not bombed like they were bombed previously, or they are actually distributed correctly for the people that are struggling on ground, the civilians, I mean. So yeah, that's what I wanted to add.
Well, once war has begun, you know, of course, there's going to be every single opportunity exploited possible to try and make money. It's everything in life is about making money. And there was 500 trucks. Like at the start of the operations post October 7th, there's 20 trucks going in, from what I understand, when they started to let them in finally after like a month in per day into Gaza or something. And then, but before there was 500 trucks going into Gaza daily. So this is I agree, it's not about actually getting aid or anything. That's a I don't even need to mention that. That's, of course, this isn't actually about helping anyone. It's obviously a PR stunt. But it is interesting to look at the port thing or the pier or whatever they're talking about. I mean, that's all a money making operation, and probably, yeah, new military base.
Also, it's also a slap in the face to the ICJ, right? Because just to add a little bit more context, when they ruled that Israel has to do more to send in humanitarian aid, the day before and the day after, the amount of trucks decreased, and then it went to no trucks, and then it turned into airdrops. So it's just a scheme. It's crazy.
I'll clarify something that is stated again. I'm sorry if I'm jumping in. Regarding the trucks, yes, they were around 500 per day. No, it's not enough to feed the people, and they were still suffering from malnutrition because the amount of aid that is going there is not enough. And it's based on a calorie diet that is calculated by Israelis to make sure that people survive. They don't go through famine, but they are not well nutritioned. And after October the 7th, when they finally allowed the trucks to go in, there were days where no trucks were going in, but the average was between the lowest was 8 and the maximum was around 180. Maybe one day it was 200 or so. And it kept fluctuating, but an average per month is a minimum of 2,000 up to 4,000 since October the 7th till last Feb.
Yeah, thanks for that, bro. I want to go to Javiria. You've had your hand up, and then we'll go cream cheese.
Yeah, thank you again. Jackson, how you see when this craziness will end? Because Netanyahu has announced that after Ramadan, they will also invade Lebanon and Syria. And how you see the role of Muslim leaders, how they are reacting and what we should expect, and when this will end. This is my main question because it's been 6 months. You are advocating, world is advocating, but nothing has changed. They are doing it whatever they want to do, and they are not listening to anyone. So my question is how far this will go, and how long we need to wait for a ceasefire.
Well, Netanyahu, I know Netanyahu and like the more right wing radical elements of his cabinet, the war figures, have indicated a possibility of war with Lebanon. Um, I haven't heard like a serious talk about Syria yet, but can Barracks or anyone confirm? Have you guys heard that stuff?
Uh, yeah, just chatter within the Israeli government that they're going to escalate war in the northern border with Lebanon. But just nothing, no confirmed plans yet. The confirmed plans, well, not confirmed, but like they're just as adamant about sending boots on the ground, like a ground
Ye-
invasion into Rafah.
Yeah,
So that I think would happen before they get their asses whooped by Hezbollah in
I
Lebanon.
think that I think that if they start a war with Lebanon, and definitely if they try to engage, Russian-backed Syria, that would probably be the worst thing that the Israeli military could get there, could possibly do. It's obviously good for Netanyahu because he gets to maintain his coalition for a longer stretch of time, but his governing coalition. But I think that it would be horrendous. I think if they actually started a serious confrontation rather than just border clashes with Hezbollah in the south of Lebanon, I think it's very likely that Hezbollah would probably occupy, if not just temporarily, maybe permanently, some of these Israeli towns, and I think it would go very poorly for Israel. and I think it would go even worse for. I think it would go very poorly for Syria too. But the thing is that I haven't really heard anything about Syria, and they don't really need to do anything about Syria because Syria is already pretty screwed with the Idlib province and with the U.S. and the Kurds in the northeast, and that's just like that's a cluster situation already. And then you have the airstrikes going on in Damascus and Aleppo, and that's just that's already such a. It seems like that's probably a non-starter, but Lebanon, I think, is a serious potential.
Yeah, because few days back I was hearing one of the rabbi who's also heading, a kind of a institute. He even talked about that even they are planning to invade Saudi Arabia as well, and they want to purify Mecca and Medina. So they are talking about, like, escalating not only from being in only in Gaza, but also going to Lebanon, and then from there to Saudi Arabia as well. And I believe that's the plan. That's why, in Pakistan, when Imran Khan won the election, but the international forces are not letting him to come out, because he was the first one who talked and spoke about the genocide happening in Gaza, and things are moving in that direction.
Yeah, 100%. Sorry, I'll go to cream cheese.
So sorry, guys. I didn't mean to try to dominate the conversation. I wanted to ask, because it kind of backplaying to what to uh to the bar had said. This fascination with the Nazi movement coming resurging again. With Operation Paperclip, Artichoke, Blackbird, with the OSS becoming the CIA in the late 40s. Do you think there might have been a concerted effort for fascists during these times to consolidate power and become the iteration of the political sphere that we see today?
Can you ask that one more time? So do I think it's a serious political threat in the United
N-
States?
Yeah, so historically speaking, for from the OSS becoming into the CIA with
Yeah.
operations like Paperclip, Artichoke, Blackbird, and things like this, and then obviously the consolidation, the consolidation of the political power from the evangelicals around the '60s and stuff. Do you think that this a fascist ideology kind of hijacked our current government and everything?
I think it's one and the same. It's just, and Hazal Din explained this in his Substack on MAGA communism. Fascism in Germany was, it was like the last fray of this globalist effort to establish their 1,000-year Reich. And so it really is one and the same. It's just kind of like an ugly fray of our current government and the people leading it. And so do I think that do I think it's like a serious like the radical elements like them are a serious threat in any way? Obviously, it's never good to underestimate anyone. It's obviously good to be cognizant of everything happening, but I think that I think that I think our government is dangerous enough as is, and it doesn't really stray too far away from the radical elements. It just puts a nicer face on it. Like everything with all the wokeism, the liberalism. That's just a nice face for the people that have the same interests in mind.
Go ahead, Barracks. Barracks.
Yeah, speaking of putting a nicer face on the crimes of U.S. empire, it's I guess this is another thing that I'm curious about, Jackson. And if there's other panelists who want to weigh in on this as well, because having a broad understanding of where people are at with this. But do y'all think that the right-wing Likudnik style Zionism of Netanyahu is a bigger threat to Palestine and to into world peace at large, or is this left-wing style Zionism of a Joe Biden two-state solution fantasy of a liberal genocide? Is that a bigger threat to Palestine and to stability into the Middle East, world peace at large? That is something I am curious about.
Well, I've gotten a lot of flack for saying this, but it is the truth, and it's exactly what Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah, has said. It's that, um, in a way, in a really big way, Netanyahu presents, I guess, an opportunity for the multipolar world because he's so insane and so genocidal, so unhinged, so power hungry that he will almost always bend the knee to the extremist elements of his coalition, which are very important to him right now, to stay in power. And when the world sees how deranged they are, it actually provides more support for military, economic, and even like religious support for the resistance against Israel. So I think Joe Biden and the EU, I think they would love to see, in the UK, I think they would love to see a liberal leader within Israel that will carry out the genocide in a quiet way over decades and decades, and do whatever the U.S. says to do. Um, I think Netanyahu presents a thorny sort of leadership for the West. And I do think, again, as we just said, I think that if they go to the extremes of like invading Lebanon or trying to start beef with Iran in a serious way, it will be the end of Israel. There's no way they can survive this. They're already struggling to maintain their numbers against Hamas, and that's not a real fighting force compared to Hezbollah and to Iran, of course.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I remember, I don't know if you remember that week-long period where these like Muslim radical liberals were calling you a Zionist and a scammer for a while because you had this opinion. There was like all these TikTok weirdos calling you out. It was for that opinion specifically.
Well, yeah, it's because they clipped it out of context and they made it sound like I was supporting Netanyahu or something. But and people still do that, but it's people still mischaracterize what I'm saying. And even some friends of mine, like Ahmed from Propaganda and Co. When we sat down for a conversation, he had me on his show a few weeks ago, and he asked me about that. And after we sat down, he's like, like I saw the videos attacking you for that, and it was a little bit odd. I didn't really understand why you said that, but now that you explained it, I totally get it, and it makes a lot of sense, and I agree with you 100%. So the smear artist will smear and cut things out of context, but the truth is that this is the mindset of the leaders of the Palestinian resistance. As brutal as Netanyahu is, he presents opportunities.